Hello and welcome everybody to the Meeple Syrup Show. It is I, Sen. And who are you in the middle there?
I'm Kat. Hi. Why am I in the middle? Shouldn't Chris be
I
in
don't
the
know.
middle?
Well,
Put
no,
Chris
we're gonna
in
make
there.
Chris. We're gonna make Chris big. We're gonna put him on this end
Oh,
and make him giant.
Oh
large.
no! Oh
And then we're gonna
no!
do stuff
Oh,
like I
yes.
don't know. We're gonna do this. Ha! There we go.
Ooh, look at that! Little
All the
meeples.
Mm.
little meeples
I
falling,
can digitally caress them.
right? And they're
I
like
can do
right
that
next
until
to
it's
your face,
uncomfortable.
and
Yeah.
it matches the color scheme of your beautiful hotel room at
Yeah.
Unpub.
Mm.
Welcome
Yes.
everybody to the show. It is Wednesday night as usual, and today we have our special guest, Christopher Chan, who is here live actually from Unpub, where he is going to play some games and do some things. What else are you doing there, Chris?
I'm volunteering. Like for the first time, I've done Unpub a decent amount, but I've never actually volunteered there. So I felt like this was a good year to try to give back a little bit.
I think it's important to give back.
I did that last year. It's really cool. It's really interesting to see sort of the back end.
Yeah,
How
I'm excited for it.
how the sausage is made, so to speak. So, Chris, for people who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your origin story, as it were?
Yeah, sure. I'm Chris Chan. I am a game designer. The game that I'm best known for is a game called The Night Cage. I also have three other published games, most recently in reverse chronological order, Push Push Penguin, Stock Exchange, and Portents. So that's some stuff I've done. I've won some game design awards, and probably most relevant to this conversation, when I'm not doing game design, I am an art director. As I believe we are going to talk about, that has a lot to do with video, at least in the advertising world that I have spent the past 10 years working in.
No, we're not going to talk about that at all. I'm just kidding.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope, not at
It's
all.
funny because we just had an art director on last week too. All the art directors all at once. It's great.
Who are you talking to?
Matt Paquette.
Okay.
Oh, well, yeah. That's
That's a
wonderful.
guy. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. We were talking about actually just like writing briefs, how to communicate your art needs when you're, doing an art buy or something. So
Dude, it's
there
hard.
you go. It is. It's really hard. But some people, they don't know and they write a bad brief and then they try to get revisions and you've already done you've used up them all and you're like, it doesn't look like I want it to. It's like, then you have to negotiate some more. Anyway, yeah. And so having a good brief it's kind of like writing a good prompt for AI if you're into that as well, which I am not. So there you go. Hello, George. Hello, Alex. Welcome to the show. So Chris, you are quite literally like a triple threat. You do game design, graphic design. You also do illustration sometimes, right?
Yes,
So
I do sometimes.
yeah, so you are all things considered. You could probably have you made a whole game that you've done everything for, as like in full production, not like the not prototype, but in full production.
Two, The Night Cage and Portents. I did all the art direction, all the illustration, Portents, and like also I laid out the mechanicals for both of those games. So
Yeah.
in case anyone needs pre-press work, you can freelance me.
There you go.
Yeah, but yeah, no, I've carried it through all the way, and I did illustrations for Push Push Penguin as well. So yeah, I don't always want to do that, but it ends up happening.
Right.
That prototype of yours that I played in the mall, did you illustrate that one as well?
Possums in a Trench Coat? Sure did.
Okay, I thought so.
Yeah.
But that one's not all the way there yet.
No,
so
that one's not so
that
yet.
counts.
Yeah.
That counts. So I was like, why didn't you mention that?
Well, candidly, because I would redraw everything if it got signed and they wanted to do the art, because those files are, very quick things that I made as quickly as I could for like pitching the concept and getting you into the world. But like as objects for press, it's probably not color safe. And also, like once you start thinking about how is this going to scale up to potentially be a useful advertising asset, it should probably be redone at a higher resolution.
Right.
Got it.
So, some terms for people. What does color safe mean, Chris?
Oh, yes. I'm sure that this... Okay, so first off, this is not relevant to video. This is relevant to print. color safe means that there are two different kinds of color schemes that we use to interact with most of the world. What you are watching me on right now is an RGB color space, meaning it is made up of little lights that are red, green, and blue and turned on to different degrees to get white and everything in between. It is a very huge range, or as we like to call it, technically a gamut of color that can be expressed on a screen, and that's great. When you make things in print, though, they don't have electricity and lights. Instead, they are passive light surfaces that are made up of rasters, which are little teeny tiny dots, not unlike pixels in video games, but physical print, right? And we make all colors out of them through four colors: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. For whatever reason, black is K in CMYK. Um,
I think
and
it's the Greek.
hmm?
I think
Oh, you might
the
be
Greek
right.
for
Yeah.
black starts with K, because I can remember being like, huh? And looking it up.
It starts with K in Japanese as well.
I'm gonna take both of those as completely valid answers to that. Um, anyway, CMYK, just when you make a file, you need to, for print, you need to make it in CMYK, or else all your colors are probably going to look a lot different when you actually print it. In particular, like your bright greens and your purples and your oranges, oh man, those things get real dull in print unless you use spot colors, which we're not going to talk about because this is an episode about videos and not print.
Not print at all.
The
We
K,
can have you back to talk about print someday.
apparently
Sure.
the K stands for the key or key plate, which is
Yes.
the old school printing term.
Yes.
Or
Key,
the
yeah.
plate that
There you go.
contains the most
Hey,
detail.
Yeah.
Alex just said
Oh,
that.
Alex
K is for
got it.
key or
Yep.
key line. There you go.
Yeah.
Figured it wasn't for the Japanese, because what? Then everything else would be wrong too.
Why not?
Or right, if you
Yeah.
speak Japanese. So where
Don't
did
know where
you
I
get your
got Greek
start
from.
in gaming, Chris?
In gaming broadly, I came to board games through probably like chess and checkers. Like I was in chess club in high school, and not very good, just to be clear about this, but I really like that game, and I ended up kind of after college working in a chess store,
Oh,
which was
fascinating.
weird. They sold literally nothing but chess, like luxury chess sets,
Yeah.
and are currently
One,
across the
that's really
street
weird.
from. Yeah,
And two, absolutely, I can imagine you doing that.
it
Yeah.
was great. I had this really weird shift because the owner was functionally nocturnal, and my shift started at 6 p.m. and went till 1 a.m.
What?
Yeah, it worked out real well with like the theater internship that I had with the public theater at the time, because I would finish up that
Sure.
shift and then like I'd pop over there and like, I'd just be out till 1 hawking chess sets, or just hanging out with the chess players from the West Village who came in out of the cold, because
Right.
that was part of why he kept it open so late.
I guess so. I guess that makes
Yeah.
sense, right? Because a lot of people playing chess outside in those
Yeah.
nights, right?
Yeah, it's a
Interesting.
fascinating community. But anyway, so it was in there while I was bored on the nights when people weren't coming in, that I started like coming up with chess variants because I was surrounded with chess sets. And this is just a thing that happens when you work in a chess store. Like all the employees did it at some point. Like, how do I come up with better chess? I never came up with better chess. I
It's
don't
not
think I'm
worth
ever
it.
going to. No,
It's a
it's
good.
definitely not worth it.
It may be a
Yeah.
good kind of thought experiment, but
No, it's
It's
not
an
worth it.
interesting exercise.
yeah.
Yeah. But that's kind of how I came to it, as opposed to, I think, the way that a lot of folks in the hobby game space came to it, which was like playing Magic the Gathering or
Yep.
discovering Catan or something
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
two of the most common ones. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Alex
so
wants
that's
to
how I
know
got
if you
into it.
ever saw any of them out in the sunlight.
The chess players, yeah.
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 Was
I
it
mean, I
like seeing
spent,
your teacher after school?
if you're, how do I say this gently? If your teacher was possibly homeless, yes. But I never took lessons from them. They were just like the folks that hung out. I thought
Right.
they were really delightful, interesting people, but you know, they were a vulnerable community, I think is probably a safe way of describing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. So, Chris, today we're going to talk about use of video, and specifically, I guess, in terms of pitching and maybe some other applications of video in terms of, like, I don't know, how to play or content creation. But specifically
Sure.
for us as, design community, we're going to be looking first and foremost at, how do we use video as a tool to convey the nuts and bolts and the heart and soul of our game to somebody who we'd also like it enough to say, yes, let's print that thing. So where does it all
Yeah.
start for you, Chris?
So pitch videos are really important, broadly speaking, when you want to show a game off, and get it out there because, you know, until you have those relationships with publishers where you can kind of send them an email and be like, hey, they have face to name, right? It's just going to be harder to get time of day. And even after you have that, you want them to be able to understand what you are trying to show them in, a useful context. Like we can do the world's best write up and it still might not click, right? Games are hard to imagine in the abstract. So videos really help us bring that to life.
Which is funny because a lot of games abstract real world things.
Are we back to
Mhm.
chess?
I mean,
I
sure.
mean, maybe. But so pitch videos are really important, right? And a lot of publishers are asking for them for exactly this reason. And contests almost universally ask for a pitch video. So it's an asset that you just kind of need to make now, like a sell sheet. You just kind of need to make them. And I think it's become increasingly important over the last couple of years since the pandemic to have
Mhm.
that, because there's just less physical review time outside of a convention context, right? So you want to get that out there. Um, the other thing that it does that I think is really important for you as a designer, is it kind of stress tests your game's concept. And I don't want to get up on a high horse about concepts, and the importance of them in game design, but I am doing a panel on that at Unpub. Um, so
When?
just
Tomorrow?
yeah, tomorrow at 4. Um, uh, but these things are related, right? Your ability to pitch your game is a reflection of how ready your game is to pitch and how clear your concept is and how well you know how to articulate it. And a pitch video can really help you figure out how to articulate a concept, or it can show you that maybe you need to think about this a little bit more, as a product. So pitch videos are a really important stress test for that.
That's a great point. It is really, truly like if you can't articulate it, how do you expect to be able to sell it? And how do you expect to be able
Right.
to translate that information to somebody else who then is going to sell it for you, right? As a
Yes.
publisher.
Because their pitch video is also going to give your publisher the beginning of their tools for talking about your video, right?
Mhm.
You're sort of teaching a potential publisher how to talk about it, right? And how they're going to get other people excited about your game
Yeah.
because your pitch video kind of needs to do that too. Even if it ends up being a game with a different theme, it still needs to get your publishers excited about it fundamentally.
Yeah. And here's another note, everybody, just in case you didn't know, that a lot of times, if you're working with a bigger company, and sometimes even one that seems small but might have somebody who's maybe the invention, person, the person who deals with the inventors, they need to sell the game internally, right? So, some of us have worked with the op before, and Pat or whoever Marino is coming from the op gets our game. He doesn't have like unilateral control over what gets published. He needs to go to other stakeholders in the company and say, "Hey, this is a game I'd really like to do," and they're all like, "Okay, lay it on me." And if he can't lay it on them, it's not going to get published. But if you have a really good video, he could just send that video to them. This is what it's gonna be, the game, but I think maybe with this license or maybe with this theme, we'd have like a surefire hit or something like that, right? So very
Mhm.
important to consider that you're not just communicating to the person that you're pitching to, you're communicating to everybody else that they have to pitch to, which can be lots of people depending on the
Yeah.
company.
I've
And
had more games die that way than like any other sort of pitch structure.
Yeah.
once they're out of your hands and someone else is in charge
Yeah.
of, yeah,
Once somebody's
that
looking
makes
at it,
sense.
it's like,
Yeah.
well, can we sell this internally? Nope. You know, that's that's the place where things go to die.
Yeah, and I think that's important for everybody out there to understand that the person who's the champion of your game may not have the final say. But
Mhm.
having a champion is a good thing. Like, you need a champion inside an internal company. not internal company, but a company that has to pitch internally.
One of the things that I think we should go over again in this particular episode as well is the difference between pitch videos and sizzle reels and, for example, your Kickstarter video and those sorts of things, just super quickly, Chris.
Sure.
From your perspective, what do you think the difference between those is?
Sure. First off, that's a really important differentiation to make because those are fundamentally different briefs, right? First off, it comes down to audience, right? A pitch video is made for a professional to look at internally who understands the market that they are trying to work for and is generally pretty savvy, right? So you can use a little bit more shortcutting. You do, however, you probably have the tightest time constraint in a pitch video out of all three of these things, right? A good pitch video really shouldn't be more than 3 minutes long, right? You can sometimes get away with it, but no matter how big or complex your game is, if you can't explain it in 3 minutes, it's probably not a pitch video. And if you can get it out in 2, that's probably even better.
Yes.
So that's the first thing. Pitch videos for a professional internally, which means that there's a little bit more shortcutting that you can do. But it doesn't mean that you should be digging into market jargon. More on that in a hot second. Your Kickstarter video is for an audience of people who want to buy games, who are already excited about buying games and are looking on a crowdfunding platform. So what that means is that you have to have more polish than you would in a pitch video because this is now a consumer-facing thing, and they're going to start evaluating it as a product that they might buy at some point, right? They need to know what the game is broadly. They don't need to know how every single thing works, but they need to really, really clearly and immediately get hooked. That's true of a pitch video too. That's true of a sizzle video. I mean, all of these you need to get a hook out really quickly, but they need to get hooked in a sense that like they get excited about having that thing on their shelf at the end of the day with a pitch, with that sort of video. So you really want to show off componentry. You want to show off behaviors in ways that feel sleek and professional, and also establish trust in you as somebody who is putting this out. So that's part of that.
Yeah, it's hilarious. In the early days of Kickstarter, it was always like talking head, like the face, like you trust this guy here is selling you this thing. Trust me. Now you don't see that at all anymore. Like almost never. No. It's super rare. To the point like it's notable when somebody shows their face on a video in a cool way sometimes in costumes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the difference between like the really interesting question is like the difference between like a Kickstarter video and an infomercial, because I think that's actually squishier in many ways. But a pitch video, or a Kickstarter video is sort of an infomercial that you elect to watch. So you have a little bit more leeway than you would otherwise.
Sure. Yeah.
And you don't have the same sort of like need to have a CTA that is anything besides back right now. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyway, a sizzle video. A sizzle video is kind of the blurriest thing in between those two notions, right? Because a sizzle video also can be for an internal audience. It can also be for a B2C audience. But let's look about it in like the most sort of likely board game context, which is that it's probably a video that's being put out by a publisher for retailers or distributors. So it's another B2B use case, and it is about the game, and it's probably got more in common with the Kickstarter video. But the idea here is that you're sort of pitching this as a thing that people are going to buy, right, in that context. But this is the squishiest one. A sizzle reel in this context is the squishiest, because like it's one of those things that can mean something completely different depending on context, right? Like a sizzle reel in advertising can be like, hey, what did we do in 2024 like for our brand family, right? Show off a bunch of things that make shareholders feel like they've made good choices. You know, that's not the same thing as a board game sizzle video, and I think you always kind of need to ask yourself what that is. But the thing that it is definitely going to have is it's still going to have a hook right at the beginning. It's still going to be showing off that concept, making it super clear and getting people excited. The uniting thing about all of these is they get people excited about the idea.
Two things.
Ways, yeah.
One, B2B is business to business and B2C is business to customer or consumer. Two, one of the things I think differentiates between the video types is the pacing. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree with that very strongly. A sizzle video, in spite of the more exciting name, is often slower in practice than it is like than you would do for like a Kickstarter pitch video, and much slower than what you would do for a like publisher pitch video. You have a lot more time with the sizzle video to really linger on things that already exist generally.
I would consider a sizzle reel to be or sizzle video to be the closest to like a movie trailer or those sorts of things. But one of the biggest challenges I found when I was first trying to figure out how to do these is I felt like I had to have animations and all of this cool stuff going on. And I even learned to animate my digital components and all this stuff, thinking that's what I needed. And basically, in a world where kind of like voiceover and everything sort of very cinematic. And no, that's actually a waste of pretty much all of my resources that I could have been using to actually communicate what's in the video.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, if it takes you a long time to do that, yeah, then it's a total waste. But if you're
yeah,
good at it and you have all that stuff already, like you have assets and you have recording and you know how to do all the stuffs with all the tools,
yeah.
then sometimes it's not that much of a waste if you're doing it anyways. But
I mean,
But I think it's not a requirement.
oh
And
no,
that's
yes,
what I
yes, yes,
didn't
exactly. Like
understand.
it's not something that it's not an expectation, right? It's not a requirement. It's not something you should go learn to do just to make that one single sizzle video. But if your life is music and sound like mine is, then you're gonna do that anyway on the voiceover part.
yeah. In practice, I don't think I've ever, at least professionally, made a sizzle video that had novel assets outside of like graphic elements that unite the thing together.
Hmm.
Um, like, though they theoretically do want to be the biggest, most trailer-like thing, I often find that they have the lowest budget in like at least in advertising world. So in board game world, though, it's gonna completely depend on what the context is.
Yeah, it's interesting. So in toy and games, that a lot of times, like it's weird because I find sizzle reels are slow, but they're short. So it's
Yeah.
like you're dwelling on one or two or three things at most for a long time, but the totality of the whole thing is very short, compared. Whereas some of the other ones, you hit a lot of points within the same amount of time. So
Mhm.
it's an interesting kind of constraint. But I think you're right. When at the start of everything, it should be, who is this for? Who is the audience of this piece of media? What do they need to know? And they're just intrinsically aimed at different groups of people.
Mhm.
And what information you tell them and how long you spend on those things is dictated about what are the behaviors that you want from those people. Like when we're talking about call to action, some of them are very explicit. They're like literally text on the wall on the video, like call this number now or back
Mhm.
now or whatever. But some of it's just going to be implicit in the actual design of the video and the planning out of the video of what we
And
want you to do because of this video.
And planning's a big part of it. I think Alex has mentioned that the sizzle video feels like it's analogous to an elevator pitch, and a pitch video is closer to a sell sheet. I wouldn't quite agree with that. I would say, in terms of the amount of time it takes, it would be analogous with an elevator pitch for me. But I would be more trying to sell, as they say, the sizzle rather than the sausage with my sizzle reel. Whereas in an elevator pitch, I do need to sell some sausage as well because I'm actually trying to pitch to a publisher. Um, for me, a sizzle reel is more like, so, okay, if I just said it with BubbleNet, for example, I'd be like, whales, bubbles, fish, check it out, kind of thing. And it's just got pictures of the thing and it's not long and it just makes you go, wow, this looks really cool. I want to know more about it. My pitch video, I'd be like, so BubbleNet is a game where you're playing as a blah, 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 and this is what you're doing, and then you're going to do, and it takes around about this long to play, and here are the components, and it's blah, blah, blah. That's my
I think
pitch video.
I think that's reasonable. Again, I think it really comes down to who is that for, because like
Hmm.
it almost sounds to me like you're starting to describe just an ad now.
Yeah,
Um,
for me, a sizzle reel is much closer to an ad. So if I'm wrong, clarify.
well, I again, sizzle reel is the squishiest term out of all of
Yeah.
these and the most context dependent. So I don't want to spend too much more time on it,
Yeah,
but
sure, fair enough.
like, but like it's one of those things where like it it generally talks about things that already exist as opposed to things that will exist or could
Cool.
exist,
Yep.
right? I think that's the most important differentiation between these notions. And at least for game designers, the more relevant stage are the first two. The third
Yeah.
one is kind of a publisher and editor problem, right?
Cool. No, that actually, that's the clarification that helped. That made a lot of sense for me. Thank you.
Mhm.
Hopefully that helped with Alex as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about making of
Can.
the video, the making of the video. Oh, by
Yeah.
the way, Chris, who made, I don't know if I told you, I think I did tell you this, but
Mhm.
who made the Night Cave video?
The Night Cage
Good.
video.
Yeah, Night Cave, sure.
So back in the day, we had an editor that was a good friend of one of my co-designers on that, from Advertising World. I'll have to think of his name later. I'm embarrassed, I can't remember his name. But for the what's it called? For the expansion Kickstarter, we used George Georgios of Oniro.
Mhm.
He did a lovely job. I will I will dig up the name of our editor for or our video guy for the first one because he was spectacular. But also he was coming from Advertising World, so
Mhm.
he's probably harder to get your hands on.
Yeah, but I have to tell you that I hated it and loved it all at the same time. Like I hated it
Good.
so much that I got the game. It
Oh,
did its
great.
j- it did its job, right? It's like I noped out of that video so fast because I have claustrophobia. So it was like F this video, but now I need to play the game.
Cool.
It was very interesting to me that the video got me. It's the only Kickstarter video that's ever got a visceral reaction from me. So he did a good job. You can like thank him
I'm,
later.
I'm glad to hear that. I really can't take like any credit for that video aside from like making the two-dimensional art assets that already existed for it.
Mhm.
My co-designers Chris and Ross were really the ones who were spearheading it, and we all come from Advertising World. I'm an art director, and both of them are copywriters.
Right.
You don't get in the middle of two copywriters
So you kind of
planning.
stepped out of the way
Yeah,
and let them do
yeah,
their thing. You guys do all
yeah.
the wordy shit, and we'll come back later.
It's the more like productive triangle, if you ever do need to put like three creatives in a room together, is one copywriter and two art directors. That is
Wow.
often like a more functional thing, just because we can split work more easily than copywriters. um,
Right.
yeah,
But
but
all
Curve
of
cut.
those things sound chaotic to me.
yeah.
Curve cut would love to be able to see some videos for context. Are there any of your videos up on your website, Chris?
Yeah, I put the possums in a trench coat one up there.
Cool.
That's a good
I'll put a
example.
link up,
Yeah.
everybody. Just hold on.
So one of the things that I found particularly helpful about that specific video, and the reason that I asked you on the show actually was,
Mhm.
so Chris and George were on a panel at Gamma Expo talking about how to make videos for game designers and those sorts of things. And one of the videos they showed was this one. And what I found particularly useful about that was the fact that no, you don't need all the bells and whistles. You just need to think about it in advance, plan what you're going to do, and you can just be a Chris in a room with a table with a game and just do the thing. And it came across really well. It did what it needed to do because the planning was correct. And the very simple things like good lighting and a decent mic were covered. And so you don't need, in a world where you don't need crazy animations, you don't need cinematic panning, like all of this kind of crap. You can do this and you still have an amazingly good video. Like it did exactly what it needed to do. It felt really well put together.
Hmm.
It sold me on the game, even though I've already played it and I already like it. And it was such a good example of how to do this with normal people resources that I thought it was really, really important to try and have you on here talking about how you did that, because so many of us think we need to do this when actually what we need to do is what you did. And most of
Sure.
that, as you mentioned, was planning.
Sure, yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm pretty happy with how that one turned out. It was that one was pretty fun to make. Uh, if anyone is currently watching it, there's like 10 seconds right at the beginning where I established the hook, where my wife and I went to a very deserted mall, and I like put a piece of construction paper that I painted black with a permanent marker on and pretended to be a security guard while she pretended to be seven possums in a trench coat, but holding the camera so I didn't actually have to make any possums.
See,
And
planning.
yeah,
Otherwise,
Yep.
you would have had to get possums, everybody.
or I would have had to make puppets, and then like it would be kind of distracting, honestly. You want to control the visual elements in a video, but that's okay. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Um, what do you want to do? Do you want to just assume that people are gonna watch it, or do we want to
let
stream
let
it?
let people, yeah, I mean,
Okay,
what
yeah,
how did you do this kind of thing? So I briefly asked you about storyboarding
yeah, sure.
and those sorts of things. Do you want to talk about how to plan a video?
Oh, absolutely. I love talking about planning. I actually hate planning, but I like planning videos. Um, okay. When you're making a pitch video, first off, you have to keep in mind that you are probably going to do all the work, right? And then you have to write a script that assumes you will do all the work for the video. Maybe you get your spouse to hold a phone for you at some point, right? But like you're probably a one-person team. The scripting part of it needs to happen before anything else, and that just needs to be the pitch, right? Like, what is this thing? Why do you care? And like, what is the general vibe of the game? And then after you write that, you have to make sure that you can say it, right? Unless you want to hire someone to do voiceover, right? And you shouldn't do that because it's a pitch video, and that's not a good use of money.
And it
So
needs to be about you.
yeah, well, I mean, so I've done pitch videos where I'm not really the center of it in the same way that I was for that one. And I don't think that you explicitly need to like
Okay.
have yourself on screen that much, but I do think you need to be able to say it just from a practical purpose, like because it's weird when you have like an AI voice reading for you.
Oh God,
I don't yeah, I don't
hate
care if
that.
you have an accent or if you have some, or if you're not the most eloquent speaker. It just needs to be something that you're comfortable saying
Yeah,
broadly,
and the other
you
thing
know?
about that, as you refine that pitch, the text down and down and down and dilute, not dilute it, but like refine it and refine
Mhm.
it and refine it, and you become more articulate with it, that will serve you in every single interaction you have about
Yes.
with a publisher or an interviewer in any time you're talking about your games. I've been interviewed about my games, I don't know, thousands of times. And because I'm the copywriter for my team and I dissect words, it helps me because I can talk about these things fluidly and fluently, and
Yes.
it's a good practice. Try it, do it, talk about your game all the time.
That
One of
is
one of
that
the
yes.
like a lot of people I know really struggle with this bit. And one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give you from what worked for me was I just sat down with my phone and I told my phone about my game. And then I did it again. And then I
Yeah,
did it
Mhm.
again. And then I did it again. And then I did it
Mhm.
again. And then I watched it and I cringed and I wrote down some of the bits that were good. And then I did it again. And then I did it again until
Yep.
and the faster you get at it, the better. And you also have that stuff sitting there available. And that's what I meant by it's about you, because this is you pitching.
mhm.
Yep.
So you're going to have to be able to do this. You can't just be like, oh, yeah, I'd like to tell you about my game and just
Yep.
the
Read
video
this
on your
thing.
phone. Like people are going to be like, that's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Alex has a good point. He says, "My tip is to time how long it takes you to get through the script. You actually don't get many words in a couple of minutes. So the average rate of speech in English is about 120 to 150 words per minute talking. But you also have to consider intelligibility and all that kind of stuff,
Yep.
and maybe leaving a little more air between things than you would if you're speaking to a friend who knows your voice, that kind of thing. So aim at the lower end, right? Two
Yep.
words a second."
That was exactly what I was going to say next. After you've gotten comfortable with it, time it. and do it again until you can say it in ideally less than 3 minutes, because at this stage you do want to leave breathing room for visual action, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be stuff that you can't account for, so you don't want to be talking right up until the moment. You probably only want to be talking up to, like, if you're doing 3 minutes, maybe 2 minutes and 40 seconds, right? If you're going for 2 minutes, 2 minutes, or one minute and maybe 45 to 50 seconds. It really depends on how like visually complex you think your script is going to be, but that's going to be the next step, right? After you've got it down to a place where you can say it and you can say it comfortably within the time frame, now you need to start thinking about what's going to pair with it, you know?
One of the things that you said in the presentation, I think it was you, it might have been George, but I think it was you, was to actually do it, like have the game out and do it
Mm-hmm.
while you're timing it so that you can tell, like, if you're saying the first thing is that you move from here to here, you're actually doing that while you're saying it. So you're saying it at the right pace. And then you can find out if you've got space for that in your timing.
You've gotten to exactly what I was going to say next, right?
Damn
For
it,
the planning
sorry.
stage. No. You got it. You got it
You
exactly right here.
learned. You learned. This is
I
Um,
good.
listened.
because after you have that, right, how do you plan, right? I have a little bit more experience in figuring out camera angles and stuff like that, so I can imagine things and time this stuff off. But even so, I need to handle pieces. I need to understand how complex those handling interactions are going to be, because that's going to tell me, one, where am I going to potentially need to have cuts in the video? And two, how long is it going to take me to do this? Is this something I'm going to be able to do in real time? Am I going to have to do a voiceover and then speed up this action in post, right? These are things that I'm starting to consider at this point as I start handling pieces, right? The other thing that I'm starting to think about here is how important is this visual to this wording, right? And I try to, as much as possible, be say, which is exactly that. Say something, see it happen, right? You really want to just keep your concept as clear as possible, because candidly, no one knows how to play your game except you when you're showing someone a pitch video at
Yeah,
this
it's a brand
stage.
new thing.
So you got to really handhold people through this. So this part of the scripting process, you can do it in a lot of different formats. Yes, you can storyboard it if that's helpful to you. But I do find that it's helpful at this point to take the script that you've written and put it into a different format now that's something closer to what's called a shooting script. Um, and with that, what I mean is, take your text, put it like in one column or something like that. Um, Put the section it off by the shots that it's going to be in. So if I have one shot of like an overhead of this and I'm saying this thing over it, I'm going to keep the text that I'm saying there in that moment, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to put the action that I intend to do sort of written out as just a loose note for me. It doesn't have to be that precise, but like just knowing what that is. And I do that for every instance so that I know what it is. In this moment, I'm also going to be thinking about camera angles. I'm going to be going back to that question of, can I do this action in one cut, or can I not do this in one cut? And that's going to determine it. So that's the planning stage. We can get a little bit more nitty gritty with it, but at broad strokes, it's just what goes with what I'm saying. When do I need to do something different with the camera?
Hmm. Do you have like a document that you use or a template that you use to time all this out, or is it just like a bunch of columns on a spreadsheet that you're doing this on, or it's
I
just in your
mean,
head?
I use InDesign because I
Yeah, you
use
live in
InDesign all
InDesign.
the time. Don't do that if you're not already like an InDesign person. Spreadsheets work perfectly fine for that.
Yeah,
In fact, I'd probably recommend that over using something like Google Doc, or like just a blank doc, because the columns thing is helpful, like,
it
and cells
is.
are helpful for this type of planning, because you really want to understand shot by shot how things are linked. That's the most important thing. And if you want a storyboard, plop the image into another column next to it,
Yeah,
right? That's
you
going
can
to
put those
help
in
you understand it.
a visual in a
So
cell.
for people
Yeah.
who don't know what storyboarding is, do you want to do a really quick?
Yeah, sure. Storyboarding is making a comic of your script, basically.
Yep.
Like you have a section of script, and you have the action and dialogue, and you have a picture of what that's going to be. Um, Storyboards do not have to be like the clearest representation of it in this context, right? You aren't selling this to a client. They do not have to be beautiful. They're a reference for you so that you know what you're trying to do when it's like 2 a.m. and you don't know what you've written anymore, right? Um, like that's what it's for,
Yeah.
especially if like you're trying to imagine a more complex action, right? Um, in your context or in this context, storyboards are as helpful as they are for you to draw them, which is to say, actually don't storyboard very much when I do this stuff, because I just want to know what my shot is in a general sense. I want to know what I'm saying, and I'm gonna kind of improvise and try different things along the way, right? As long as I understand the framework that I'm working within.
Yeah.
Um, but if you have never done this before, it can be a really helpful tool.
Mhm. And, I mean, you can draw it by hand. I've done
Yep.
it in, like, Canva, just, like,
Yep.
moving assets around, like this a game piece or whatever.
Yeah.
Lots of
I
s
just
You can
take
lots
also
of ways to do it.
photos.
you can take
I,
photos.
I,
Photos are a
Yeah,
great way to do it.
I
yeah.
set I set it up and I take the photos so that I can actually see what the angle is going to look like, and I go, I
Yeah.
like this,
So
I
so
like
Mhm.
you're
that.
reverse storyboarding almost.
Yeah,
Well, that's
That's
that
totally
that
fine.
is that is a form of storyboarding.
Yeah, yeah,
Storyboard artists use that technique all the time where they
yeah.
like, set up a scene and like, take a camera or a lens and try to just kind of figure out where things are. And I think it's actually really important to take photos of the setups that you want
Mhm.
to do. So setups are a little bit of a different thing when we're starting to talk about shooting a video, right? Because now we have to get a little bit practical with this. So you've thought of your script, you've thought of all of the shots that you want to have. Okay, how many different states does my game exist in, right? Like if you're making this in tabletop simulator, this is actually a lot easier. You can just make a save state for that.
Yeah,
I did
which
that
is
with my
actually
pitch video.
recommended.
Yeah,
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 make it in
I did
Tabletop
that for
Simulator.
like for my what's it called? For my pitch video for uh it was still called capitalism at the time, but stock exchange. That was mostly in tabletop simulator, and I used save states like crazy for that so that I wouldn't have to reset things because this is an element of filmmaking called continuity, right? Um, and what that means is you need a setup so that if you go back and you need to shoot a shot again, which spoiler, you always do, you never get things in one shot. It doesn't happen. Take multiple shots, even if you think you got it.
Mhm.
Uh, you need to reset things to a particular state. So you should take pictures of your setup and you should understand how many setups you're going to need to make your pitch video happen. And if you want to not go crazy, you should keep those setups to a minimum. Just because it's hard to keep track of things from a continuity standpoint, and it makes your edit more complicated afterwards.
Yeah. That's a great point. And then from a game design perspective, if you don't know what your actually setup is going to be for like the start state of a game, and you say it's randomly this, just take a picture of it and like label the
Yeah.
date and time and then save that picture. And then the next time when you're looking, how did I set up the game last time? It's right there. It's right there. And so it's the same concept, right? How do you maintain like continuity in something, whatever it is, in the game's rules, or in this case,
Hmm.
the whole video, right? How do we make sure that it, from cut to cut, it looks like it's seamless in some way?
Right. And we don't have to get too far into the weeds of like what great filmmaking continuity is here, but broadly speaking, try to make sure that if you need to use two cuts from two different moments, that it looks like it's made of one moment, right? That's the basic goal of this.
Hmm.
We can talk more about continuity and cuts and things like that later if you want to, but that gets a little bit technical and honestly isn't super necessary for pitch videos.
Yeah.
in a lot of cases, the highest level of continuity that you're really going to need is just to make sure that if you've got like three different colored players, like player tokens, make sure they're always in the same place, because otherwise it makes
Hmm.
it hard for people to parse when they're looking at those. So
Yeah.
it's more that side of
Yeah.
things rather
Yeah.
than
Or if you're referring to three very specific cards
yeah.
in somebody's
Yep.
hand as a demonstration of, player powers or something, they're still there the next time. Like you're still
Yeah.
looking at the
Yeah.
same three
Yeah.
cards. That's
Or
that's
if
kind of what we
I'm
mean.
or if I'm making a demo of like how a player might get points, it's useful to see like the same color token move up the score
Yes.
track, you know?
This
One
is
of the tricks
actually
I use for that is I actually go backwards.
See, I
Mhm.
told you, going backwards. This is actually a really good comment on just rule book writing in general, right? If you can follow this continuity, right? If you can follow one player's story throughout the whole rule book, you're going to get a lot more buy-in from the readers than if you do random ideas of random players doing random things at random times. So often I'll actually storyboard the examples throughout a rule book in that way so that we have continuity of people, of the cards they have, and that one decision in phase A now makes sense in phase B because we'll continue the story, right? And I think that's really
Yep.
important. And so we do it in
Yeah, this is
video as well as in rules writing.
I mean, I have a theater background too. I've done everything. But back then, one of the books that was like really big for me was a book called Backwards and Forwards, a technical manual to reading plays by David A. Ball. And the thesis of it
Super
is
cool.
dead simple. You should be able to read a play backwards and understand why characters are doing everything they did. Like, how did they get to this point? Okay, Macbeth is dead.
Yeah.
Macbeth
How do you
died
not?
in this past
Why?
moment because this. What did Macbeth do before that that led to that, right? And I'm pretty sure that it's been a while since I've read that book, but I'm pretty sure it actually just does that. It analyzes Macbeth backwards.
Right.
And it's a really powerful way to look at if your game makes sense too. It's a really just useful way of understanding continuity broadly.
Yeah.
I'm
But
guessing we have a slightly different theatre background because that's not one of the words I would be saying that many times. I suppose you're not in a theatre, but carry on.
no, I was a playwright.
Ah,
Uh, but video continuity is not. It doesn't need to be this rigorous. Just know that you need to have it. So take pictures of your setups, know what your setups are, and when you go through that script, right, you should know which setup you're working within, right, at all points in times. So that's that element of planning. The next comes down to how you shoot this stuff. So this is where I'm going to give you a little bit of just general filmmaking craft technique. Um, when you shoot a video, I'm going to harp on this many times. You should always shoot it more than once. Okay, no matter how many takes you do, shoot it more than once. And if you need, you should also be like doing some of your rehearsals recorded for this stuff. Like moving pieces around on camera is very different, right? Um, so the other thing that's going to help you with that is you're going to want to probably set up some sort of monitor situation. Monitor can mean your literal computer monitor. It can also mean your phone, tablet, can mean a lot of things, but a monitor meaning something that shows you what you are recording as you record it. Because especially if I'm handling a bunch of pieces, it's useful to see where my hands are, if they're covering things up, what angle I'm at, right? So that you spend less time like working with bad takes.
Hmm.
so you actually know that that thing that you're doing is actually in shot, one, and that it's framed correctly, and that
Mhm.
everything that needs to be seen is visible. Anyone who's done this incorrectly knows now, oh no, particularly if you only filmed it once and now you're trying to edit from that
Mhm.
you created and it's too
I
late and you can't fix
It's
it.
pretty funny. I have a body camera that I wear sometimes that it just takes like interval shots. Like every minute it takes a 15-second video, and I wear it it's magnetic, so I wear it around while I'm teaching. And sometimes I forget to like frame it properly, so it's like all off kilter, and you just wasted a day's worth of shots, right? So
Mhm.
same thing. Like you want to have that
Yeah.
monitor situation so you know that what you think you're getting is what you're actually getting, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I got distracted from what I was actually trying to say. Monitors are really important though. Like figure out a monitor situation, or at least look at your recording afterwards to see what's going on if you can't like figure out how to set up a monitor, because that can be a little technically annoying. Um, what I was really driving at here is you want to shoot your video generally three ways. You want to shoot it in its widest that it's going to be, meaning the camera is furthest away from the shot, collecting the most information. This may or may not be the angle that you want to work with, but it's going to be the spine of things. We refer to this as the master in a lot of cases. Uh, I like to record voice while I'm doing this. You don't need to do that. but this should give you an indication of pacing and should be something that you are going to come back to during the edit. That's why you do this shot. Okay. After you've done that, record it again closer, generally some sort of mid shot, right? Like if I'm here right now for the wide, right? The camera, or here right now for the wide, I'm here for the mid. And then last but not least, I'm close in for detail shots. And you can be the most improvisational with these, right? But those are going to be really useful for your edit later when you're moving around and like trying to figure out how everything comes together, or if you just need to cover up a bad shot, like you covered up a piece, now you can cut away to the close-up, right?
So you said record them again. I tend to record them at the same time. So I have like 3 cell phones and I have them all recording at once.
You can do that too.
What is better? Is it better to re-record so that you've got multiple takes? Or is it better to do both and have just lots of footage?
You could do all of it at the same. You do all of those things.
This really depends on how much you want to manage. I've done it before with multiple cameras running at the same time, and I have found for me it is actually more efficient to just re-record.
Okay.
That's not going to be true for everyone. Some people are going to work better with multiple cameras, but the trouble that I find with multiple cameras, even though they have tremendous advantages, which will I think you can kind of just intuit why that's advantageous, is that it's harder to sync things and start things up, and every time I need to reset the shot, it takes longer, right? And it's just better for me to reset the shot more quickly. So multiple cameras, I find it a little bit harder, and it's also more complicated from a monitor situation, right? I'm probably only going to have one of those, and then where are they physically going to go, right? But if you have the space and you have the cameras, yeah, do it. Great. Like more footage, more better. But you don't need to, but don't bury yourself under it, right? Because you're also going to have to watch all of that to like pick your shots later. So that's sort of the structure that you want to use, though. Shoot it wide, shoot it mid, shoot it close, right? Do that multiple times. And when you get into the edit, then you can pick your favorite wide shot, maybe where you're talking the most effectively, or where you just generally got all the movement, right? If you want to do your voiceover separately. Then use those mid shots and those close-ups to add interest and to cover up your mistakes, you know?
And do you do that for every angle? So
I don't do that for every single. I don't do this for every single angle. I do this for every. Well, sorry. Hold on. Let me make sure I'm understanding the question. Are you talking about like setups or shots?
So, if I'm, say, for example, demonstrating how to play, let's say BubbleNet again because it's easy. Sure. I've got a single board. I've got these pieces on it. I'm going to have an overhead shot. So I've got like I've got a frame above that I've got my phone on way up high. I've got a second one where I've got the phone sort of coming in, just making sure I'm actually in shot when I'm demonstrating this. So it's coming in at this kind of an angle. And then I've got a third camera that's looking straight at my face from the other side of the table. That's generally how I film these types of things. And then I just use what I want from those. And I do a clap at the start so that I've got my
sound sync. Yeah. Because you're using multiple cameras, it sounds like you're shooting a little bit differently than I would in this particular context.
So you can disregard if it's not useful.
Well, I think it sounds like you're talking about a long shot where you're doing a lot of action and kind of basically treating it like a continuous, yeah? So I think in that context, sure, that makes a lot of sense for like this is actually a great situation to use multiple cameras if you're doing a long continuous shot.
You can get angles.
Because then I can just cut the angles.
Yeah. I don't do long continuous shots for the most part.
Oh, so you just shoot. So my problem was like, wow, that's a long shot to have to keep redoing. But you're just
I not.
That's why he has lots of setups.
That's why. Well, I actually only had like for the possums in a trench coat one, I had 3.
Oh, that's good.
But what I would do is during the planning stage, right? You remember how we were talking about making like moments with this, like in the like cells in your spreadsheet, right?
Yeah.
For each of those moments, right, that I had in the wide, I would generally also get a close and a mid, right? If I plan something to only be a close up, then I wouldn't shoot it in wide. I would only shoot it in close up, right? Because
Right.
I
Okay.
know I don't want that in wide. But if I get neurotic and I'm like, maybe I could shoot this in wide, like in the moment, right? I'll take an extra like 15 seconds to do that, right? I'm not going to spend too much time on something that I know I want to be a close up. But this is the
Okay.
planning thing, right? I generally do not use long continuous shots though for myself, just because I when I'm working with one camera, that's hard, and because I also, if I need to do something like just change to a different setup, it's just easier to change to it or something else. I also rely pretty heavily on being able to switch to close up and being able to switch to mid to like look at different sort of angles and different approaches.
Hmm.
Um, with one camera, I think that's probably a more efficient way to do things, but for a long continuous shot using multiple cameras, I think is more efficient.
Yeah.
It really depends on how you want to do your pitch video and how you're comfortable doing it, though, and how complex the action is, right? Like, because when you get into a more complicated game, right, like you might need to do some more time skipping around, right? Like, I think a game like BubbleNet probably can get away with like a long continuous shot because it doesn't have like, you know, it doesn't have the same sort of like up that like if I was, I don't know, if I was making a pitch video for like Concordia, right? I think that would be a little bit harder to pull off.
Hmm.
Yeah, because like, and then you have to repopulate the whole board and shuffle these 6 decks and
Right.
flip the board over and then do all the things again. And now it's your
Right.
turn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have all three of them running, and I just say, and now I move this, and now I move this, and now I move this. So I am actually reshooting, but I'm not
Mhm.
stopping the camera.
Okay.
I mean, and that works too. If it's easier for you to organize your videos and post that way, awesome, do that. I find it easier to work with multiple files, just
Yeah,
because they have timestamps and I can reference that a little bit more easily.
got it.
But at the end of the day, I'm still going to sync those and output those. Like that editing's a separate process. We'll talk about that
Yeah,
later.
cool.
Um,
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure I understood what you were saying.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that we clarified that because those are two completely different kinds of approaches that are completely valid in different contexts, right? And with different equipment setups.
Yeah.
But one of the things that you brought up that I want to talk about, which was really central to the panel that George and I did at Gamma, was sound. Um,
Oh, sound.
oh boy, oh boy. Look, both George and I are video
Do
people,
not do that. Do not do that.
um, and our biggest collective advice for everyone making a pitch video is use a microphone.
Get a good mic.
Like, and it doesn't even have to be the world's best mic. Like, honestly, like a $20 lavalier, like that you buy on Amazon can go so far. A lavalier is those little clip-on microphones. Like, if you look at the possums video, I have one nakedly exposed right here. Um, like, just use
Oh my.
some sort of recorder that isn't your camera at the same time, because you need to be clear and articulate, and you also need to be able to take that audio cleanly away from your footage, right? And you can do that either by recording it separately. That's completely valid. If you do that, I encourage you to make sure that your pacing is even more rigorously planned, or you can do it in the moment as you're doing stuff, which is how I've just started doing it because it's faster for me to talk and handle things at the same time. Um, but to do that, that's called doing a sound sync, meaning that your video is going to be one file and your sound is going to be another. But spoiler, your video file is still actually recording sound. And what you're doing that for is to make sure that you can sync up the sound with the visuals. And that's why we do a clap, clap at the beginning of things. If you were a fancy movie person, you might, have one of those clapper
Clackers.
boards, right? The point is, it's a thing that needs to happen for like basically syncing up. If you look at like the sound waves, like where things are, and that makes a big spike that makes it a lot easier for everyone in the edit. So you just need to do that. Please just record sound better, and it doesn't have to be expensive. Like truly $20-30 on a lavalier will do the trick. There are other microphone types that we could go into depth about if you really want to, but just use a mic, use a real one.
Some of them can just record on the mic as well. Like you don't have to understand all of the technical, how do I plug this in and record two
Mhm.
tracks or all of those sorts of things. Like you can learn to use OBS, you can learn to use, what's the one that we use? DaVinci. All of those sorts of things. They're great for this. You don't have to though. You can like, I think it was Jay Cormier, who has this
Oh,
amazing little mic that actually has a native recording like built in. I think it's
Yeah.
solid state actually, just a little
Yeah.
recording thing,
yeah.
and you
Yeah.
I
just
mean,
hear it
if it's a
afterwards.
weird device, it's probably Jay because he worked for Best Buy. So
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and now I sort of put those things together, and that made sense. But
it might
yeah,
be.
it's super handy because then you can just be like, all right, cool, plug in my
Yeah.
sound later instead of being like, but depends if you're trying to do the monitor thing or not. On your screen, OBS can be good for that. So
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah. Mine is just a pretty cheap one that I plug into my phone and use the Rode recording app, which is free, to get the sound on, and then I'll sync it up later. There's
Mhm.
probably a better way to do this. I'm not really a sound guy, but I just know the importance of clear voiceover.
I mean, there are other ways to do it, but they're not necessarily any better for the purpose, right?
Right.
Or any, and definitely not cheaper,
Yeah.
and definitely not less intensive, like wiring and stuff like that. Like
Yep.
you can do much better everything if you really want to go up to like a
you can drop a wee
4K.
mic in, you can do all
Yeah,
of
Yeah.
the
You can use a shotgun mic. I mean,
yeah.
you can also though you can also, and this is something that I saw one of the creators for Shut Up and Sit Down doing. You can also just hold a mic and talk if you think that you don't need
That's
both of your hands.
all the
That's
influencers are
completely,
doing that with the
it's
mini
totally
mics too.
valid. You can
It's
do
fine.
that.
they do that
You
with the
don't
lav
need.
mics. It's super funny, and I hate
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah, with
somebody
little
said they do
labs.
it for engagement. It's very funny.
Mm.
Alex
You
has a
can
really
you
good
can
comment.
actually get the cutest tiny, like it looks like a tiny little mini mic, but it's actually like a little tiny lav mic, like
Mhm.
a little lapel mic. And it's designed for you to hold it like a Muppet, in front of you, being like, yes, but don't eat it.
No.
Like
Alex's
don't eat the
suggestion
mic and
is
don't, yeah.
remember to have your mouth close when you speak. That's right. So the only
Yeah.
thing that I'll warn you about, if you go close to the mic when you speak, you will get plosives all over the place, which is, well, I won't because I have three screens in front of it. But plosives are like the P's and the B's, the explosive
Mhm.
sounds from your
Yeah.
mouth, your lip smacks. You'll get those when you go too close to the mic, and you can edit it all in post. It's not super hard, but it's also just time
It's a
consuming that you
pain.
don't want to
Yeah.
have to do. So, just like video, the cleaner your audio recording is from the get go, the better your end product will be because you won't have to do things like matching
Yep.
sound and cutting things out, and it's horrible.
Yep.
It's so Chris will know this, but I spend for every hour of audio, I probably spend 2 to 3 hours on editing.
Oof.
It's
Yep.
it's like a 1 to 3 to 4 ratio of time that you have to spend on audio and video too, because and then
Yeah.
you add in like color correction for video, and you add in like room. So, oh, that's another thing. It's just an audio hint. Take like 5 to 10 seconds of your room audio, so that your
Yes.
algorithm can cancel it out. It cancels your room
Mhm.
ambience out. That's just like, don't go into a recording situation without taking a dead room sound. That will help you in the long run, because if you do sound correction by hand, it's forever and a day. But if you use automation, it's kind of okay. It's
Yeah.
decent enough for the most part. So
That is
anytime you change that room, or if you're recording the next day, just get a new baseline room recording.
Yeah.
It's also a good idea to think about ambient sound and things like that. Like if you're recording outside, maybe do your sound inside.
Yeah, so one of the things you can do is you can re-record sound, which is awesome. You can do
Yeah.
like a voiceover, which is perfect. If you F up your sound, as long as your pictures are good, you can strip entire audio tracks out of the video and then just replace it with your voiceover, and you'll have that nice sound. You can warm up the room. You
Mhm.
can, put all the sound reflective or anti-reflective stuff because you don't want sound waves bouncing. Um, anyways, you can have a much better room quality inside and much better control of the situation.
And that's actually a big part of why I'm, as much as I do use my own face in my videos, I'm big on, if you don't want to show too much of your face, that's fine because that's easier to fix sound problems. It's easier to fix language problems when you're not talking. Anything
Yes.
that I say with my face on camera, that's what it is. Deal with it, right?
Yeah,
Um,
when your mouth doesn't match the sound that you're hearing, your brain goes, "What is going on here?" So,
yeah. But maybe you'll have a game where that will be part of the concept. I don't know. It could be really funny. Um,
It
so
could be about like really rough overdubs.
it could be. I would play that party game. Um, anyway, the other thing that George and I really wanted to drive home in that panel, aside from sound, is stabilization. Um, I know that it's cool with phones to, have everything feel like it's loose and shaking and I'm talking to it, but please don't do that in a pitch video. Use some sort of stabilization. And by that, I mean a tripod, some books, a board game, just something that holds it in the same place. But I do recommend a tripod specifically because you can change the angle more easily. And the easier it is to change angles, the more time you save, right? So don't break the bank, but you can get a phone tripod for pretty cheap, like under $100, like probably under. I'm going to say 70 would probably be about the area that I'd be comfortable with.
You can get
But
so
yeah,
much cheaper than that as well. That
yeah,
is very, very good. I've
yeah.
I've managed to find like a really simple, basically it's a selfie stick, but
Mhm.
it's got a tripod down the bottom, so you can make it go up quite high. There are IKEA has a set of like it's got a round base and then it's got like one of those goosenecks and it holds
Mm.
your phone. There are so many really, really, really cheap things that will hold your phone for you. Yes, they won't be as cool, but oh, there's so much out there.
Yeah. That,
yeah, I guess it
just
all
use
just depends on the camera
stabilization.
you're holding up as well. Like the
Well,
the the
yeah.
heavier ones, right? You need a
Oh yeah,
better.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
I'm
for the
I'm talking
phone, if
about
you
like phones.
Yeah, yeah. You should be able to
Yeah.
get a really decent one for
Yeah.
very little.
oh
Yes.
for a proper like if it's a proper camera, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think this is the one I use for overhead shots
Well,
when
that's a
making
good
yeah,
one.
it was only like $25.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a
Yeah.
version very similar to
Yeah.
that. It just clamps, but without damaging the surface onto the side, and it comes up and over and down, and
Yeah.
you
Like
can
Yeah.
stuff
do.
like this.
I mean, there's
Woo.
so much.
Okay.
Yeah, there is,
Yeah.
and I think it was $20 as well, something
Yep.
like that.
That's
There's a
good.
lot out there now.
That's good. That's good.
And this one will also take proper cameras, but it won't take the full weight of like a DSLR
Mm.
at all
Yeah.
of the angles.
So just caveat, in case anyone did watch the possums video that we were talking about, the first scene is shot on a phone, but the rest of it is shot on a Sony A7 II, which is from 2014. Just to
Mhm.
be clear, I've had that camera for ages. If you were to go and buy that now, it would probably be like probably about $600. So like was more cutting edge at the time, is very cheap now.
Yeah.
And
Six
that's kind
hundred
of
bucks is still so much for a camera, and a lot of yeah. My
that
DSLR
is not a
was no, I know, I do know, but that's why I was like, ooh. I think
yeah,
my
but
DSLR was something like 700 or 800 new, and
yeah,
so it's the baby version. It's the basic entry level.
yes,
And yes, buying it secondhand.
buy secondhand, it will save so much money. Like you don't need that. I have a nicer camera because I also just I like taking pictures. Honestly, I use it more for stills. Like the fact that I use it for video is more because it can and because I can change the lens, which is the main advantage of a camera over a phone.
Yeah.
And if you don't care about lensing and those words and lensing means nothing to you as a word, don't worry about it. Move your phone closer or further away as you need to and like crop it in post if you need to.
Yeah. With
Right?
with
Like
with stabilization.
yeah. Just do it with stabilization for the love of God.
Or
And
Um,
if you need to
like
move
Alex's
around,
befriended
you can get
photographer.
yeah.
what's it called? The oh, why can't I remember what it's
I
called?
don't know. What are you talking about?
So it holds like
A
Oh, are
what
you
gimbal?
talking about a gimbal?
gimbal.
Like the
Yes,
thing
thank
that's
you.
moving my camera right now
Yeah,
that automatically tracks me?
you can
It's a
get
gimbal.
gimbals
Yeah.
to help keep the camera calm if you do need to walk around. like it chills it out, and you've got stabilization software in your camera as well in a lot of cases. So
Yeah, gimbal
I would
stabilization is pretty good, but
I would be careful about it though for like most board game contexts, just because gimbals they're for big moving subjects where the camera needs to move around a lot. They're not good at close up. Kind of across the board, they're not good at close up, and that's where most of like if you want to see any board game component, they need to be pretty close up. Um, so I just be a little cautious about gimbals, but you can use them for shots with you for sure. And
that's what I was
like,
thinking of, like
yeah,
the sort of like
yeah,
in the
but
mall shot, for example, if we were walking towards you, or if you were, all those sorts of, like if you're doing the flavor
sure.
stuff,
yeah.
right?
But,
That's
but just candidly, that one was just my wife holding a phone, and like that was the stupidest version of that it could possibly be. Um, so that's it doesn't have to be that for like a dumb skit, right? But you can get that stuff for sure, and that doesn't have to be expensive. Um, the last thing we probably should talk about is lighting.
Okay,
Um,
yeah.
so I'm going to kind of cover the broad strokes of what makes good lighting in a board game pitch video context. Um, but lighting is a rabbit hole that you can and should go down if you start to care about it. But it doesn't have to be hard for what you're trying to do, because you need to know the goal of lighting in board game pitch videos, right? You don't want shadows that cover up your stuff. That's really the basic goal here.
Mhm. Or
Make sure that you,
reflections.
yes, you don't want, and yes, in particular, you do not want really bright reflections on a glossy prototype board. Um, Reflections are also sort of another topic because they are hard to solve at any level, period. But you want to try to avoid too much glare that's going to be reflective, and you want to try and keep your shadows, just useful rather than obscuring. And what I mean by useful is that it's useful to see depth with a shadow, right?
Yeah.
So like but it's not useful to like have a strong overhead shadow. And like most rooms, your light source is directly above you. The hotel room I'm in doesn't actually have that. I have a lamp right in front of me that is hitting me with some Rembrandt light. It's great. It's a little too warm, but it's better than it would be if it was like
Do
completely
you take
top
your light
down.
meter to every hotel you go to and like measure?
No,
I
no,
mean, look,
they're all too warm. Like
They're all too
anywhere that
warm.
you go
I
that's
know this.
comfortable is too warm for video, but like
Yes.
nice for your eyes.
Yeah, yeah,
look
yeah.
how warm the
Yeah,
light is here. Like
yeah,
this is full on amber, and it's not
Yeah.
even that anyway.
yeah.
Um, I was a theatre lighting technician, so
Hmm.
what I'm particularly interested in is how to translate that into video, because this lighting here would look great on a stage, and it
Hmm.
looks here. Wow, hi San, super
Oh,
close.
sorry, were you looking at my nose?
It looks very strange.
Yeah.
Like I look jaundiced and unwell from
Well,
lighting
Whoa.
very well on a
so
stage.
there are two things that you want to keep in mind with your sort of house lights, right? Broadly. The first off is white balance, which is a camera thing. It's not a thing that you have to worry about in like eyeball life. But your camera probably has a white balance setting. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set your white balance appropriate to whatever light source you're using, right? And hopefully a way that is reflective of the colors that are, appropriate for your game. That's more important for a serious or for like a Kickstarter pitch video than this, but you don't want it to be distracting and you don't want it to be too dark to see what's going on regardless. Um, uh, your how to set white balance, just look at your camera settings, or do it in post, but have like some sort of white object in the shot that you can white balance against, um, or gray. Um, what you're going to want to do with your lights, ideally, is have a off like an off center source, right? Something that when I'm handling it, I'm not going to be casting shadows all over my pieces. And you're going to want some sort of fill light. Okay. So in lighting, there are two key concepts that you need to know about. There's key light, which is the light that is the main light source. If you take that away, it will just be dark, that light source. Okay. And then there's your fill light. Your fill light is light that's generally coming from a different direction that makes the shadows less deep. You can actually see it on my face right now. the key light's right here, lighting me, and then the fill light right here is coming from behind me, and it's making it so that the shadows on my face right here aren't completely black. They're a little bit softer as a result. If I do something like turn this off, behold, right? My key light is gone, and now we have my computer and that, right? And that's not right. So that's the basic idea. Your key light wants to be directional and it wants to be soft. Okay. Getting soft light, candidly, is not the easiest thing in most spaces because it requires space. You generally want your light source to be somewhat further away from your subject because that softens the light, but not so far away that it gets dim. And you want your light source to be as large as possible, right? So like again, there's a lamp here. It has a big shade that's increasing the size of a bulb that's about a little bit smaller than my fist to be, the size of a watermelon and a half. And that light source is now softer than it would be if we were to just can I take this off right now? You see how I'm just lifting the shade and how the shadows just got way harder.
Mm-hmm.
Same trick, right? It's called diffusion. So that requires space, and it requires you to have a light source that you can fiddle with. Those are not easy things to do in all contexts. So if you don't have light equipment and you don't want to buy light equipment, you can find a sunny space and you can shoot when it is at an appropriately sunny room that isn't full on direct sunlight, right? Near a window, but not directly in the sun. The trouble with that from a production standpoint is you're dependent on time and weather, and your light source will be changing over the course of the day, which is why we use studio lights. And again, studio lights don't have to be expensive, right? Honestly, if you go onto Amazon and just look for a light kit, you could probably find something real good for $80 or so. You will need to get some sort of light, but it'll probably have some sort of diffuser box or reflective umbrella.
Yeah.
Those are what I use. And those are kind of holdovers from like still photography for portraits and other stuff like that. They're very flexible broadly. The main difference that you're going to want to look for if you do get a little bit more serious with your studio lighting is you want to make sure you're looking for lights that are actually for video, because sometimes the lights that you buy, especially if they're very cheap, cheap LEDs, can have refresh rates that are at odds with your camera, which can create a weird sort of
strobe effect,
strobing thing, and you want that to not happen. You want them to have a appropriate refresh rate for your camera. I don't know those numbers offhand, but look into it. And
something
if you
hurts.
Yes, generally fast hurts. That's not an even multiple of probably 30 frames a second.
If I can hear it, because I can hear lights, then it's too fast.
You can hear lights?
Yeah, I hear lights all the time. So I wear headphones all the time. I can't concentrate with lights on because I can hear them. It's a superpower.
Yeah,
it's not. It's actually it's horrible.
It's a super curse.
Yeah, it is. It's no fun.
I can often hear them too, and it's part of why I get migraine around some types of lighting and so on, the light itself plus the sound of them.
Well,
apparently it's an autism thing.
Mm.
Anyway, those are my big tips, technically and recommendation wise.
One of the things that I do, and this is a holdover from theater lighting, is I try and bounce the light. So if the light is too bright and the diffusion isn't working the way I want it to,
bounce
I'm
it
going to try and demonstrate it with this little torch. Flashlight for you lot. I think the ceiling's a little bit too far away. Let me see if I can. Oh, there we go.
There's a little bit of bounce from the ceiling.
You did it with your hand.
So I've put my hand up here, and I'm now bouncing that light back down on me.
Onto your head.
Onto my head.
You get a little halo going on.
Yep.
So if you get that bounce right, you will get the right combination of lighting that changes the way that the whole image looks. And you can bounce it off different angles, and you can get different things. If your light is too bright, or if you're unable to eliminate the shadows that are bothering you, but you don't want to lose the shadows that give you the depth, bouncing the light works really well. Diffusing is also really useful. So you can diffuse with other things, like you can just get cheesecloth or muslin or something like that, and you can hang that above where you're
Yeah.
shooting. And that works for camera, but just not as well as the real equipment. This is workaround stuff.
Well, yeah, this is kind of like the reason why you spend money on this equipment, because you can actually achieve most of this stuff with things around your house. Like I could use those pillowcases behind me as a diffuser. The
Yeah.
problem is they don't have any structure, so they'd be real close to my light. So like, how are they going to diffuse? I'm going to have to make a structure, right? Whereas if I just go and I buy a white umbrella, right,
Yep.
that attaches to a stand that I can adjust the angle on, I've
Yep.
saved myself a lot of time. That's the main thing that you invest in when you like buy lighting equipment, not like this light is just magically better. It's not.
No,
It's
light is
just
light.
easier to
Well,
work
light is
with.
light. And same thing with sound stuff, guys. It's going to be roughly similar in terms of acoustic treatment. Like you could treat a room by going to the Goodwill and buying every single pillow and throw rug they have, and you could probably do a good job of treating a room, but it just doesn't look very professional and kind of
And
smelly. So
you can baffle it in a lot of different. So
oh yeah, tons.
what you're saying there is basically you're preventing sound from bouncing off the walls,
Mhm.
so that so you
Yeah.
don't get the echoey sounds.
Yeah.
For
Yeah, or
those,
you don't get standing
that works.
waves that cancel each other out
Yeah,
is really the issue for phase correction, right? So,
yeah. I
and
actually managed to
echoes,
create that in
echoes
my
as well.
office, and I couldn't figure out what it was, but it was. I think it actually was basically an audio standing wave, and it was super weird. And then eventually, I managed to
Mm.
get it to go away.
Sometimes you just move one piece of furniture and it changes the entire.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
audio feng shui, right? So,
I
Yeah.
moved me, and
yeah,
it's was
that
like
could be it. You might have been sitting like right in the literal dead spot for audio.
so
Mhm.
weird.
Was it this room?
No, it was my office. I've
Mhm.
changed a lot of the stuff in that room
Okay.
since, but at the time I was just like, "Why? What is that noise? Why is this
Well,
happening?
you
What
so
is
if it
going
was
on?"
the room that you're talking about right now, that you're in right now, like the windows are horrible for reflection, so that
Yes.
could have been it. But anyways.
This room's full of
Yeah.
soft furnishings, which makes it better, but yes.
Alex says it also works in reverse. You can add dark shapes to remove reflective glare from a direction. Yes.
Yes. That is a good tip. Um, I think in practice with a pitch video, it is it is often more time consuming than it's worth, unless the setup is going to be really static, and you're not
Right.
going to
I
mess
see.
with it.
Yeah.
It's something that like, um, I've done a decent amount of product photography with work, where we work with, because I used to work on like some liquor brands, like so getting the reflections right on a bottle
Off the bottle.
is a
Yeah.
is like a combination of like getting the right shape diffuser and getting the right shape block, so that you are making the right black where things are supposed to be and the right like shape of light against a bottle, right?
That's so interesting.
Um,
Yeah.
and these things are like great and really useful for stills. In practice with video, like pitch videos, unless it's really distracting glare, I wouldn't worry about it too much. But that is a really good tip, especially if your setup is going to be fairly static. But unless you have like a really glossy board or something like that, it's most of the time not going to be so bad. Overhead shadows are really going to be your biggest enemy in lighting.
Agreed. Well, it
We've
is
gone a little bit over
just
time,
a
but I
little,
think it
just a
was
little.
Yeah.
pretty good, useful stuff. Is there anything, Chris, that you really wanted to cover that you haven't had a chance to get to?
Nah, I think I got to all that and more.
Oh, I mean, it's certainly very valid, very useful, very valuable
Lots of good
content if you
information
want
there.
to explore. Yeah.
Um, I'm actually thinking about making like not storyboarding, but like the organization sheet. Like what would it look like if I was to make a sheet that organized my video? Like what would I
Um,
have to put in there?
well,
Like everything
uh,
you said, but I'm just trying to think about it in my head. Like what would I do?
so I would start. Let's break this up by columns in a spreadsheet. That's probably
Yeah.
the easiest way to think about this. So one column is all of the bits of script, your scene, right, or your voiceover broken up into scenes. Then another column is the visual that's going to go with it, and
Hmm.
then I would make another column if you need to get technical with like how you think it's going to light or like the approximate time that you think it's going to take. you know, or you could just put it into one of those other things. But if you want to be more organized than me, you could do that. Um, um, you just add a column for
Location?
every, yeah. I mean,
If there's a location
if
change,
relevant, yeah,
location.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, if you wanted to, I would just add another column for everything that you think is going to be a variable that you want to keep track of.
Mhm.
But I think the important thing to remember with a pitch video is that it's not a movie, right? It's not a
Right.
trailer. It's not going to need to be as high production. So do as much as is helpful for you so that when you get to the moment of shooting, you know what you have to do and you still have a little bit of wiggle room
Right. It's
if
not
you
so
need
locked
to.
in that
Right.
if part
Don't
A F's up, you can't do part B or C.
Right, because you might do everything right in your planning and then you put it all together in your first edit and go, oh, I did that wrong, right? You want to have a little bit of flexibility no matter what you do. So do as much as is helpful and try not to do anything more, right? But as much as is helpful is still pretty rigorous, right? Like, and it's most rigorous around your script and around your timing broadly. Um, and you have a little bit of flexibility about how you cut, right? And you know, if you need to break things up, like you'll know, right? But you want to avoid having to go back and reshoot if you can. That is
Mhm.
the worst.
It's interesting. It's very jazz-like to me. Um, just like in in a lot of jazz, it's like timing is more important than the actual note you play.
Mhm.
So it's
That
very
sounds
funny.
accurate.
Yep.
I don't really like jazz.
No, no, but it's like so in radio we call it like hitting the post, where your voice is timed exactly with the transition in the music or whatever end of a commercial. The beat ends out and you're done saying your stuff. So timing and audio quality really to me is what makes something watchable. The video kind of is supplemental unless it's like really horrific video. Um,
You you did actually touch on one thing that I think is really important for people to think
oh,
about,
what's
especially
that?
when they have this level of control. If you are using any kind of musical track in the
Oh,
background,
heck yeah.
please think
Mhm.
about the timing of your
Yeah,
musical track in relation to the transitions between your shots. When you end, please don't end partway through a phrase.
of a song.
Yeah,
And yeah, and then there's all sorts of other tricks you can do with like voice compression and getting your voiceover to the right level for the sound that
Oh,
yeah,
your
yeah.
background noise and things like that.
yeah,
So learn how to like if you can draw a curve, you can do it because that's all it is, an automated curve that the volume will
yeah,
track for your background tracks, right? So you'll
yeah.
be fine. You'll be fine. It's okay.
The one of the things that that I want to talk about with music, since we brought it up, is
Mm.
music can be a really useful tool to put your viewer at ease. Um, there's a thing where if humans watch a video where there's no music or background noise, right? Like it's really empty sound, it makes us uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Um, and the main reason I use music in pitch videos is so that I set the viewer at ease. If I'm trying to play with a notion of ease, I will take music out, right? But it's like with a pitch video, it's not a music video, right? It's not about like supporting the music. It's about how the music supports the idea that you are trying to get across. Remember, at the end of the day, this is not supposed to be the most beautiful high production thing. Basically the this is basically like the most rehearsed, polished version of your elevator pitch you're
Yeah.
making, you know?
Yeah.
So just use music to set people at ease and to like keep things going, but
Yeah.
it's not supposed to be a dominant element.
No. The other thing you can use music for is like the shorthand that music gives you to perhaps do a thematic link without ever
Mhm.
having to say those words because they take time, right? If you do the inner world where orcs and elves, blah blah blah, instead of that, if you just pick a song that is kind of reminiscent of Lord of the Rings, you can get away with a lot. And there's lots of free music out there. Like, please don't like steal music. You can download like a lot of royalty free music for very cheap. If you have a Canva subscription, you have access to a bunch of
Yeah.
royalty-free music that can actually get you sort of in the mood, because you can search by tagged key terms in a lot of these like royalty-free, license-free, CC0 sites. And you just say, what is the mood of the music that I want? Like, let's say you're doing a game about Las Vegas gambling. You can find like a, you know, speed, gambling, risk, and you write those terms in. Find me a song that's like that, and it'll find you a song that probably is that. And you can get short loops that you can loop over and over again. You can get long songs that are more like a long form content song,
Yeah.
and then use those to communicate something about your game or your video or the theme of it without ever having to say, this is a game about gambling in Las Vegas. It's a high risk, high reward stakes thing. The music can communicate a lot of that for you if people have that kind of background knowledge of certain things.
Yeah, because music is super contextual too. Like, so it's at the end of the day, you're still probably going to need to just say everything very literally in a pitch video. But music can be a really helpful counterpoint that can shorthand some of that.
Yeah. Alex says even matching the harmony of the music to the melody of the speech can make a big difference. Yeah, I mean that is definitely next level.
I have no idea how to do that. That's
Well,
outside of my expertise.
yeah, I mean some of it's going to be like the cadence and the rhythm of the speech as well too, right? How does your speech fit into the in between spaces that the music provides for you? So
And
that
the
again,
timbre of your voice and the warmth and all
yeah,
those sorts
so
of things.
the music is an accompaniment to the speech instead of the opposite, which is kind of following along with what Chris is saying. But yeah, there's lots of stuff, guys, and you don't have to do all of it well. But these are different tools that you can bring to bear to just make your pitch video that much more compelling. And I'm not saying everybody has to do it. I'm not saying if you can't do any of it that you shouldn't try. You should still try just to put a pitch video out. It doesn't have to have all these elements, but you might come across one that really fits with how you work and what you like to do and what you're already good at. These are not necessarily skills that I'm saying go learn this skill because every game designer needs to know this, because you
Yeah,
don't,
definitely.
Well,
right?
hold on, Sen. There is one thing that they do actually have to have
Sure.
regardless. It's the script.
Yeah.
Like no matter what else you do, your script has to be good. Like you
Yeah.
have a
Okay.
bad script, you're not set up for success.
No. So that's a good point. So yeah, I think what I mean is that you have to be able to communicate your idea across to your intended audience. How you do it depends on your strengths and limitations, your
Hmm.
previous skill set and all of that. But Chris is right. Like the one way that we almost all have to do it is with the words that are in that script, because it is the effect of that medium. That's what people expect, is to have
Yeah.
good words said. Words said goodly at them.
Efficiently too.
Yeah, concision, brevity.
I mean,
Look
all
at
of
those
us
words.
are
Good
very good
things.
at talking, and all of us can definitely pitch off the cuff when we need to. And I still think that none of us would be able to immediately successfully make a pitch video without a script, even about a game that we've pitched 100 times. I
I
think that
don't want
all
to.
of us would.
I would
No,
No,
never try.
no,
no.
no. That sounds like a
But my,
nightmare.
my point is, like, even people who are very good at talking all the time don't skip the script. So
No, like
please.
if I'm committing something to a permanent record, oh my gosh, I have to think about this. I'm gonna take some
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Too funny. All right, everybody. It is 10:30 here in Canada land, on this side of the Canada land. And Chris, it's also 10:30 where you are. So
Mhm.
you gotta get to bed, buddy. You got like a whole con to look
I
forward to,
do.
Yeah.
right? And you're giving it, what time is your talk tomorrow? You said 2 o'clock?
4.
4, right? One of those multiples of 2. And Kat, what are you doing this weekend? Are you going to anything, doing anything, hanging
I'm
out?
not. No. I was originally considering going to Unpub, but we've decided to reduce our travel at the
Yeah,
moment. So
I get you.
I instead spent today writing a bunch of stuff on Blue Sky about playtesting and about all of those sorts of things leading up to this. So
Good.
hopefully some of those things are useful for those of you who are nearly at Unpub.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
you're there or you're heading there this weekend, have a great time. Say hi to the crew for us. Say hi to Chris while he's there. And we will see you all next week. What's happening next week, Kat? Do you know? Did I
We
just put you on the spot? I'm sorry.
You sure did. Yeah. I have. Oh, big games. We're talking about big games.
Oh,
Next week is April the Tooth, right?
April the
Yes.
Tooth. Yes.
April the Tooth. Yes, we're talking about big games. And we're
Big
talking about
games.
big games and how to squish them into your pitch. Because a
Oh,
lot of us
yeah.
talk about pitching small things or medium things. Anyone can pitch a party game in the time that you're given. If you're given 1 minute, you can still pitch a party game in that time.
Yeah.
Try pitching a big game. So
Right.
we've
So who's
got some
coming to talk to us next week?
we have got, I put my phone down, obviously. We have got coming to talk to us about big games. Where'd you go? Drew from Whirligig.
Yes.
We've got John Gilmore
Yes.
and Connie Vogelman.
Awesome. What a great
Yes.
group of people. All right.
Oh,
Cool.
and Tam. We've got
Oh,
Tam as well. So
and
we've
Tam's
got
coming too.
we've got a big group of people
Yeah.
who've got a lot of experience with big games,
There you
and
go.
we're going to cram that into that session.
Wonderful. All right, everybody. If you'd like to talk to me some more, you can reach me at Senfeng Lim on Blue Sky specifically. I mean, I do have a Twitter account still, but Kat, where are you?
At Drea Inc. on most of the things.
Most of the things we will say. So
We are most reachable on Blue Sky.
yes.
We are removing ourselves gradually from the metaverse.
Okay. Maple syrup on all the things. Chris is at Exifer Chan. How do you say that?
Xo4chan. I don't know. How do you say like Christmas with an X? I generally call it Xmas.
I thought it was like hug and kiss for Chan.
Oh,
You know what? Yes, let's go with that.
Let's go with that.
Go with that.
Kiss
I
and
like
hug.
that.
So.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Kiss and hug upper Chan.
Yes. Yes. And then patreon.com/peoplesyrup. I don't think we've looked at that in years, but there you go. And next week we have a whole bunch of people coming to talk about how to pitch those big, heavy 4X 6-hour long games. Okay, that's it. Oh, and Chris, we forgot to tell you, you are responsible for this. Dun dun dun.
Oh, no.
What's your final advice? What's your final advice?
My final advice. Okay, my final advice.
Not final for life, just final for this episode.
Oh, that makes things slightly easier. Slightly. Okay, my final advice for this episode is don't freak out. Just don't freak out. It's going to feel overwhelming sometimes when you like get everything together. Don't freak out. Work through the problems. Easy ones to the big ones.
Yeah, I like that one.
Done is better than perfect, folks.
Yeah. Behavioral momentum. That's what we call it in education. So you start small, you accomplish it so you can move on to the bigger problems. Because you start with the biggest problem. Like if you got an essay question on the first page of your test, you'd be like, nope, I'm out. But if you get a true false questions on your test at the beginning, you're like, I can do this because I can guess and still get 50% of those. Right? That's how you have to build the test, everybody. All right, cool. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks very much, Chris. It was awesome talking to you. Kat, we'll see you later. Good night. Yes. Bye. Bye. Excellent.